Hey, and welcome back to the Creative Coffee Break on a completely strange time because I'm super organized. Hey, my name is Werner Puchert, and I'm a creative entrepreneur, and I do these live streams to bring interesting people with some interesting approaches to doing different interesting things. A lot of interesting in there. So new time slot. Also took a little bit of a break. Had a birthday. We had some holidays in Poland, and yes, I am broadcasting from Warsaw, Poland. Beautiful weather outside, and also because my guest today is also from South Africa, we decided to do kind of a lunchtime, our time stream. I'm going to move the stream to Thursdays because I think we all kind of in summertime want to go away for weekends and stuff. I'm the same. So I'm going to be broadcasting on Thursday, but I am going to shift the show sometimes this time, or I'm going to shift it across to 1 p.m. ET because I have some international guests also coming up in future streams. So yes, a few couple of things that I want to talk about before I invite my guest on. My guest today is Joshua Nuttall from South Africa, and we're going to talk about reverse mentorship. And then after Joshua, I have Tammy back, and we're going to review Alta Nell's LinkedIn profile. So that's also waiting at the end of the show for us. So quick notes. Self-promotion. I recently published another of my geeky design tool reviews. This one has kind of hit the mark because it's something that I'm also kind of passionate about. And if I had to put a label on my favorite tool of the year, and it's not really the end of the year or anything yet, the Zenith and Purpose Anatomy is really one of those. I've seen it in action, and I'm super excited about it. So if you're interested in, or to see how this works, or this little design tool, perhaps you can use it in your space. Go find me either on my LinkedIn profile or on my YouTube channel. You can go watch that video and get hold of folks. It's really something interesting to behold. And then something else I want to talk about. I don't want to say the word because I'm a good boy, but tonight is the third edition of the Entrepreneurs We Make Mistakes Night, but you can see in the URL what the actual thing is. I don't want to get slammed for swearing on my live stream, but I had an opportunity to be on edition number 2, but it's really a kind of event that invites entrepreneurs and business folks to come talk about the things that has gone wrong and how they dealt with it, how they fixed it, or what they did to move beyond this point. So it's kind of refreshing to listen to people, because I think when they talk about these things, because it's when you fail that you learn the most, and it's even better to learn from someone else's mistakes, I guess. So it's tonight at 7 o'clock, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It might be a bit earlier. I think 6 o'clock. I'm screwing this up. But go to that URL. You can register. There's still space, and hope to see you there. And then something else I wanted to mention, Dennis van Gillen was on one of the streams. I think he was here 2 events ago, talking about his book, The Zero In Formula. And I just wanted to give a bit of a nod to him, because he's hit the top spot in the UK bestseller list with the book. I enjoyed the book myself, had a great conversation with him. I would like to think, though, that the fact that he's hit the top spot on that list is because he's been on the Creative Coffee Break, but he might differ on that opinion. Now, next thing, with all my blah blah done, I wanted to go into the next part of the show, which is to talk about reverse mentorship. And for that, I invited a new friend, a young friend, Joshua Nuttall. He's an entrepreneur from South Africa. He travels all over. In fact, he did a bit of traveling now. And I met him through one of the other guests that was on the show a while ago, Jens Heitland. Yes, and he's been around the block. Even though he's only 28 years old, he's been in advertising. And since he's been 24 years old, he's been running his own entrepreneurial franchises and affairs. But I think I'm destroying his profile, and I would love to invite him on. Josh, where are you? Who are you? And why are you here?
Werner, it's an honor to be on your live stream. Thanks for inviting a fellow South African on, even though we're sitting halfway across the world.
How crazy is
let's hope
that,
this
man?
internet connection holds.
How crazy is that? Joshua, I mean, I slaughtered your profile, which is kind of a tradition with the Creative Coffee Break. But let's start off with at the start, and maybe just a bit more about your background, because I know you have this kind of creative background, agency, A lot of things going on for yourself at the moment and also in your own business, but maybe you can say a few words about that.
Yeah, Van, I don't think you slaughtered it at all. I think you're being quite hard on yourself. I think, at the end of the day, we people, and this is part of the conversation. It's all building it out. And maybe just to cap that off is I've never had a business card. So to say that I've got a specific title or something like that would be remiss of me or incorrect. So yeah, thanks again for the opportunity, and it's lekker to be here with you.
Lekker.
And so lekker, there we go. So where did I start? And probably the best way for me to describe that is that I've said yes to a lot of things which I might or maybe shouldn't have said yes to. And that's sort of basically the premise around how I approach things, because I've been given some remarkable opportunities. I've worked with startups, with business brands, with travel brands, with short-term insurers. And I've also worked with some performers with the likes of Endorsements Youth Choir and their journey to America's Got Talent in 2019. And so where I'm now, I'm currently sitting in Johannesburg. Vanna knows this because we were just catching up before the live stream. So you may see some people moving in and around me. But yeah, that's why I'm also sitting outside trying to make Vanna feel a bit jealous about this wonderful country that we both share our birthplace from. But he's obviously sitting in cold Poland at the moment.
Yeah, it's not so cold, I must say. But I am kind of jealous just peering over your shoulder there and seeing the folks like walk out. I mean, there's a thing that if I have to kind of, because I want to riff a little bit about South Africa and Poland too, but there's one thing that I don't know if you identify with this, is that, we like to do the small talk thing. And one of my favorite things is always to go in the coffee shops and then talk nonsense to the staff there and to people that you just see. And it's like just seeing you sit in the environment just kind of brings it back to me, man. I miss my country. But talking about my country, Josh, like what have you been doing in it? Because, like have you been looking after it? And jokes aside, like what is the environment currently? I mean, you're one person, you can't speak for a whole country, but what is the vibe there at the moment? What's going on?
Yeah, I think, look, Vanna, the easiest way and the shortest way to potentially answer that is to say that it's been a tough year. It's been a tough year right across the board for the entire world, I think, but especially inside of the developing world. And I would categorize South Africa in particular inside of that phrase or that term. And so where we are as a country is, fortunately, as an individual, the last 12 months have been relatively kind to me because I work and I've got interest in the digital space. I've been able to carry on with my day-to-day work and also pick up and meet a variety of different people internationally like yourself. And I think that from a digital perspective, there's been a big advancement. But on the ground, I think that we are yet to see the full effects of the pandemic and some of the struggles and challenges that we faced. But I think that there's one, maybe the right word would say optimism. I think that South Africans, always like to see and look at the brighter side of life. And we are very resilient people. And I think that there are certain challenges that have brought us together. If you look back in history and you look at events like the 1995 World Cup or the 2010 FIFA World Cup, where a lot of people said, geez, is South Africa going to be able to host a massive event like 2010? And there were all of these challenges leading up to it, but we pulled off a remarkable event. And I think that's sort of some of the feelings and the sense that people are starting to say, hey, if we band together, we can produce some great things. So hopefully we can do that, and that we can turn some things around in the current situations and challenges that we find ourselves in.
Man, I'm so happy to hear you say that. I think one thing that I've been missing a little bit, and this is kind of when you start relying too much on media, and I'm not saying fake news, because media tend to show like highlight reels of a situation, is that I identify with what you're saying about the optimism. But then, when you watch the media, you see, like vaccination challenges, what's happening in Africa with the gap, also digitally, right? I mean, we've been lucky. I count myself lucky being able to work in a digital space. But I spoke to someone today located in the UK, and he's working in the education environment, where for him, even though he's very positive, he said that one of the things that he's also become aware of is that even in digital, there's a divide, because we are so lucky to talk to each other digitally, but then bandwidth, access to devices. I think before the pandemic, I joked about access to the internet being a human right, and I wonder if that's not becoming like even more true, like more truer than usual, I think.
Yeah, and maybe just to double click on two things that you mentioned there, Vanna. The first is just around the digital divide. And I think that it's definitely been accelerated over the
Yeah.
last 12 months inside of this African and the South African context. But something that we also need to remember is the smartphone adoption rate. And I think
Yeah.
that I was thinking about it last night, and I was actually quite blown away. There's statistics which say in South Africa, there's as much as a 73% of the population have access to a smartphone. And if you
Man.
think about what that means is, and I know we've chatted about this in different conversations, but around using existing infrastructure to service that connection need rather than laying down expensive fiber cables and things like that. We would all love to be on fiber, but I think that we've got, especially in the developing world, we've got certain challenges and certain constraints, let's put it that way,
Yeah.
that we need to play with and work with to make stuff happen.
And it's so like, I mean, we're going completely off topic a little bit, and I'll bring it back, but it's like just listening to you talk about it. I remember when I left South Africa, and this is about 5 years ago, I know that mobile or smartphone adoption was starting to pick up, but the feature phone was still king, right? And we were talking about like, I mean, it's like the silly statistic of like 150% of the population, because people were carrying two phones or they had double SIMs and all these kind of things. And I remember, like, for us, our mantra was always like mobile first or mobile only, right? So like it's heartening to hear that like even the smartphones are being picked up and that the penetration is so like high, right? Good times.
Yeah, and I think that it's fascinating, because I think you touched on it earlier around there's a certain portrayal that the media put out, and I think we have to be quite cautious of that. We also have to respect it in certain situations. But then also there are things, and one of my friends runs the Good Things Guy in South Africa, which is a good news website, and
Oh
I'm sure you may have
yes,
heard of it.
yeah. I mean, when did that
Yes, I
start? That
know.
there was something
So
that
Brent
happened,
started
right?
in about. Yeah, so it was started off the back of, and again we're going off track here, but
Yeah,
luckily it's two South Africans talking, so we'll bring it all back together and make
of
some
course,
make
it'll
some
make
sense out of it
sense.
all. But
Boer maak 'n plan.
it will make sense. There we go. So Brent started in actually in 2014, and there was neck nominations, which were going right around the world. And he turned out and he'd been nominated by a friend, and he said, "Okay, well, hold on. These neck nominations were all to do with drinking and getting you to down a drink or something like that." And he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to turn this thing on its head." And he turned it into the donation or a giving act. So instead of drinking something, he turned it around to give something. And then he started out with a simple video. And then after that, he really took it to where it is today around sharing good news stories. And I
Wow,
think
man.
that sort of ties into really what we also going to chat about today is about people. And about connecting and learning from different people inside of the space. And what he's done is quite phenomenal. And so a big advocate of him, and really grateful for the work that he's doing and has done to influence some of our thinking in South Africa.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that and also going off topic with me on that one and exploring it. But let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. The main topic today is something that I don't know a lot about, and arguably I thought you came up with the term. Kudos. But we are going to be talking about reverse mentorship. Would you mind taking a moment to just like riff a little bit on that and define that a little bit and what that means?
Yeah, so Werner, quite honoured that you thought that Jens, who you mentioned earlier, and I came up with the topic. But the truth is that it's sort of been around for a couple of years, and there's a link that I'm sure you will pop up later, and we'll chat later about
Yes.
where from 1990, people were exploring a way that you could bring young thinkers into your organization to do different types of thinking. And I think that our interpretation of what reverse mentorship is that we're wanting to create a space where the leaders of today can learn from the leaders of tomorrow. So what does that mean simplistically? Simplistically, that means that you are bringing and enabling spaces and opportunities for young thinkers to come in and even teach or educate some of the experienced thinkers inside of that space. So what does that do? That essentially offers different perspectives. It offers younger perspectives, and it also offers a bi-directional mentorship development program, which we'll get to later, but essentially where it's saying we can all learn from each other. So whether we are a young thinker or an experienced thinker, we all have opportunities to connect with and learn from one another.
And that's sharing of ideas, because I don't want to make not that my viewers would think that, but it's not about like sharing like how to do things, business insights. There's a lot of kind of positioning around culture, sharing of culture, because I think sometimes as the more senior you get, the more disconnected you could get from your staff. Or potentially the other thing to think about that I realized is that it's not only about your staff, but then also your future customers, right? They are also young and growing up to be customers for you. So it's like a lot of culture, and then understanding, what is important to the new generation. How does the new generation think? Am I hitting it on the head, or does it go deeper than that?
So it does, and maybe let's just go slightly deeper than that. So I think that you've started down a train, and let's take it one step further. So, in terms of saying what can you unlock with reverse mentorship, and I love how you sort of described it in sort of the LinkedIn promo that you put out in terms of shifting and traditional. And so if we double click on shifting, it's basically saying what's got us here is not going to get us there.
Exactly.
And saying that we can use young thinkers, young perspectives to help us become better or build more sustainable businesses. And then the traditional evolves, and it doesn't stay the same for a set period of time. If you look at lessons from history, and Yuval Noah Harari, who many of you may know that are tuning in today, and his book Homo Sapiens, he talks about how we've evolved through time. And I think that that's where we believe the work that Jens and I are doing with the XYZ Playground is around how can we unlock young thinkers, young perspectives, and create sort of magic transition moments to unlock that future traditional moment inside of that space.
And the thing is, hopefully I'm not taking this now in the wrong direction, but it's also a little bit about diversity, right? Because I think, and I was pointed this out a while ago, because in Poland, usually when someone talks about diversity, because of the makeup of the population, you kind of think of gender. In South Africa, when you think about diversity, you think about race, maybe. You go into a direction with this, but diversity actually encompasses a lot of things. And I think the one that's kind of sometimes underplayed that I'm starting to experience now is age, because it goes both ways. So the older you get, the less you're keen to put your age on the LinkedIn profile. I've discussed this with my co-host Tammy a lot. Or younger, it reflects experience. And what the reverse mentorship does, kind of reframes it. It brings the older and the younger together, which is interesting, right? And you're kind of leveraging that value that diverse thinking brings, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's sort of saying that when are the best diamonds created? The best diamonds are created in pressure situations.
Yeah.
And now, if you're saying you're bringing 2 or 3 or 4 different generations into a space to collaborate, to share ideas, to combine their thinking, and to really combine their knowledge with one another. So you're bringing in young perspectives, you're bringing in old perspectives. What is generated out of that? And that's where this reverse mentorship engagement space, these opportunities to connect and collaborate with one another, is really exciting inside of that space, because it's not only focusing on the bigger ideas out there, but it's actually focusing on tangible problems or questions that you may have as a business, which you can then use different ways of thinking to dissect and analyze those.
So, Josh, like the thing that I want to explore a little bit, because I want to get into the how, right? But I want to ask you a question around, I totally underestimated your age. Not that because the thing is, we've spoken so many times, and then when I speak to you, you learn it, you read a lot. I learn tons from you. So you're like reverse mentoring the hell out of me when we have our sessions together, right? And we talk about our things. But are you currently practically helping different entities connect to implement reverse mentorship? Are you just starting with it? Because initially I thought, okay, cool, this guy's driving it, but you're a youngster yourself. Like, how do you get your clients to buy into it? Do they buy into it already? Do you have to go sell it? Like, can you riff a little bit about like what you're currently doing in this space to get people to do it?
Yeah, awesome question, Van. And I think it's great to double click on the how. And so maybe just quickly is, like I mentioned, obviously the concept of reverse mentorship has been around for a little while. but the actual practical the way that's brought into organizations, embedded in the way of thinking, that hasn't been explored at greater depth. And so part of the work that Jens and I are doing, and that I'm doing in particular, is how do we start creating a global conversation about this? We want this to enable different types of conversations. We want to enable it from a longer term perspective. We don't just want it to be internally that it's a whole little, that silent secret inside organizations. We really want this to become something meaningful and a movement per se. So how are we doing that? So how we're doing that is we are working with one client at the moment where I've been brought in, and I'm part of the Heartland Innovation team, and my role is I'm a reverse mentor coach. And so that's how we bring that in. And so we bring in a different flavor or a different type of thinking inside of that space. From an onboarding or client perspective, is how we approach it is we really go to them with the opportunity to say, we want to learn from you, we want to engage with you, and we want to best understand your problems. So we're going in sort of with an open canvas. We're going in with a framework that we say, if we go through this framework, we can help you, but you need to help us populate that framework. And the outcomes are then generated off that way of thinking and the decision-making process that we take you through inside of those engagement opportunities that we create with you as a client.
So are you then working with both the older coachee and then the younger coach? So you're working with both sides of the coin to get this set up?
Yeah, so it's really about, and you mentioned it, and you thought that we'd created this, and that's the whole thing, is we've got to start teaching the market out there around what is reverse mentorship and what is the value that it can unlock. And it's funny you mentioned and you bring this up because Jens, over the last week, Jens and I have really been having a few brainstorms about how do we go about doing this and how do we create a bigger conversation about it. And one of those is exactly that. It's, creating opportunities where you are engaged, or where I'm engaging with an older generation or more experienced thinker than I am myself. And then also bringing on other younger thinkers who have a passion or who would like to connect with executives. Let's use that broad term as an example.
Yeah.
But I think that that's exactly it, is you wanting to create scenarios where you're working with both sides, and then you're wanting to create opportunities where both sides can come together to share different types of thinking and engage with one another to explore different concepts, problems, or cultural diversity challenges that they are facing.
And I think it's such an interesting, this is a bit of a side note, once again, digressing, but we spoke about this, is that in general, and I think the data still holds, is that Africa, and be careful, Werner, because Africa is not a country, it's a continent full of different countries, is Africa in general is a very young continent, right, in a sense of like average age. So it becomes actually quite interesting to have this conversation about reverse mentorship if you know that a large part of your population is actually young. So it's really tapping into that kind of untapped gold mine, I would say.
Yeah, and maybe just talking about the younger generation. So I can't remember the stat offhand. I think it's around 46% of the global population by X year in the 2020s is going to constitute Generation Z, which is quite phenomenal if you think about it. Because and that's where sort of reverse mentor thinking can help you as a business in terms of one of those things. So if we just double click on that quickly and say you're looking at your future customers. And how are you looking to engage with your future customers, and understanding them through a model or a mechanism like reverse mentorship can help you identify those situations and get to know them better, because the products that you're building, the businesses, the systems that you're creating need to talk to those people. They don't need to talk to the likes of myself. They need to talk to people who are 10, 20 years younger than I am, which is also fascinating to think about.
Yeah. It's amazing, man. And as a next step, like, are you ready to talk a little bit about the how? Shall we jump into some of the visuals and then perhaps talk a little bit about the how? And I'm just going to flick over here, move you around a little bit. And I think one of the first things that you spoke about, or that you hinted towards, was this bi-directional, if I may, because I don't want to break your train of thought here and your flow, but I think this is one of the first aspects that you spoke about. In kind of the how flow, or can you explain what this is all about?
Yeah, so maybe Vanna, before that you had the XYZ playground logo. I can use that to sort of lead into everything. So just quickly, is XYZ Playground. So this is a reverse mentor collaborative that we're building out. It's a platform where we are creating a space for young thinkers to come and meet with experienced thinkers, and experienced thinkers to come and meet with young thinkers. So this is a collaborative. It's a business that was started in October of 2020. And that's how I met Jens. And Jens and I are working to build this out with a number of other individuals inside of this space. And we've currently got a few beta testers on from a young thinker's perspective. And we are engaging with a few experienced thinkers and hopefully looking over the next couple of months to see how we can better build that out and take that forward. But quickly on the logo is the logo, as you can see on the screen, is Generation X, Generation Y, and Generation Z. And from there, why we picked those three letters and then obviously the word playground is because we want all of the generations to come into the playground and to think collaboratively, to problem solve, so that we can then use different, what we call cross-generational thinking to unlock ideas and to unlock solutions from a design and a creation perspective to help create better spaces and to build better as well.
Interesting.
So yeah, Vanna, thanks for that.
Yeah, just a question on that, by the way, because I haven't given it much thought. I'm such a consulting guy because I always think that, okay, cool, Josh is going in, you're doing a consulting gig, you're kind of setting this up, which is fair. But is there, and I think you've hinted towards this community that you're talking about, are you guys building out a platform where youngsters can go and engage or become mentors, or like how's that gonna work?
Yeah, so that's one of the elements to it. There are probably about 6 different elements inside of that. So essentially, how the best way to describe what you just referenced is an enablement framework and enablement thinking. Is we wanting to create a space where you can come as a young thinker and you can get enabled, so you can learn different ways of thinking. So if you think about some of the work that we've been doing, we're building out 7 sort of modules where you can learn how to share your ideas, you can learn how to pitch your ideas, you can learn the best way to communicate with executives and things like that. So very much aligned with some of that thinking. But like Jens and I joked yesterday, is we need an extra day in the week just to get through some of these things.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, because I think one of the kind of stumbling blocks that you might face connecting the two generations together, or seniority and junior, is language, right? Because I've found in my going up through advertising agency, swearing way too much, having a certain kind of approach and language, and then you step into the executive space. When I moved over to consulting, for example, there is a clash, right? And you have to become a bit more sensitive to how people engage. You should still bring your ideas, but you have to find a common ground, or like what you're saying, like a language to make that bridge work. And that's what you guys are doing, kind of building that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I've used the example before in a podcast setting where I've said that young thinkers are extremely passionate, and they sometimes come in too hot into a boardroom.
Oh yeah.
And what I mean by that is, if you walk into a boardroom and you're very hot under the collar and you shout your point across, there are very few executives that are actually going to give you the time of day. And I think that you, as a young thinker, you need to learn and appreciate that. And you need to also learn from the way that and the language that you need to speak. Not saying that we necessarily need to use all of the acronyms and the formal language that you have to do in a legal setting, for example. But I think that there's definitely some language that you do need to appreciate and get onto terms with before you go and share your ideas with experienced thinkers.
Probably leveraging a lot of kind of like user-centric approaches, like empathy and that kind of stuff, right? And like, I know empathy is sometimes such an over kind of used word, but I think that's one of the things that we all kind of learn over time, is that when you walk into a room, even if you have your agenda, like if you can understand a little bit about the tension in the room, or how what is kind of like on that person's mind that you're about to connect with, just makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's sort of if you flick the slide now, that's a great sort of segue into
see what I did
into
there.
that. And
it was planned.
It's almost like we prepped for hours for this banner, which is in true South African style.
Of course.
So yeah. So I think why I love that segue is because you'll see on the screen, you essentially got from and to. So I think in the past and in previous conversations and concepts, you may have seen a client and an executor. So if we take an example, is you may see me as the client and Van as the executor.
Yeah.
And Van has come to me and said, Josh, okay, well, we're going to be doing this live stream. These are all of the points that you need to hit, and I'm going to have a slideshow, and and now we're going to click the button, and it's going to execute, and it's going to execute. And I love the word that you used, Van, around empathy, because that sort of really describes the circular nature below that. And from a reverse mentorship perspective, and I've already touched on it, is we really believe that reverse mentorship and mentorship in general is bi-directional.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by that is, inside of a design thinking system, is you've obviously got different types of feedback that you receive. So if you look at the two section, you've got co-creator and you've got participant. And those are two quite key and interesting words, because you're saying that in co-creation, you're also participating in the experience. And I think that that's something for young thinkers to realize, and experienced thinkers, because I think sometimes experienced thinkers, they go into situations and they build out certain products, but they don't actually realize that they are co-creating that for future generations. They rather just see themselves as a participant of this current phase that they're in. They don't necessarily think about the opportunities and challenges that they are creating inside of the decisions that they're taking.
Yeah.
So that, in a nutshell, is what this really talks to. And Vanna, like you mentioned, empathy is massive in terms of our world and some of the thinking that we do. But another one is also listening, in terms of how we go about pulling those things out. And you'll know from your design experience, and many people watching the live stream also, from the lessons that you get taught as a designer, in terms of the importance of listening, user feedback, user testing, all of those little things. So we try and put that inside of this reverse mentor space that we're creating, and use all of those tools and different types of mechanisms to extract the value.
Yeah. And Josh, just looking at this diagram, and now that you've contextualized it a little bit, there's something else that just jumped to mind, and I don't know if you stick with me on this one, like, let's see if it goes somewhere, because what I've recently seen is, like, I think sometimes what we do is we build like walls around the things that we know, right? And what you've just explained here, okay, we've built kind of like between my design experience, what you guys are doing with the reverse mentorship. But something else I'm seeing that I want to riff on a little bit and see if it works here is that I find it interesting that there's a client and executor relationship. And in a consulting world, if you set up a relationship with a client where you are the executor, and then it's called the supplier, it's very difficult to then change yourself from a supplier into a trusted advisor. You know what I'm saying? It's like I've been in an agency situation before where the relationship with the client and the agency soured to such an extent that the agency only became an executioner of what the client instructs. And then when you try and flip that around, which was a massive job for us to do when I went in there, to flip it around to say, listen, client, please trust this agency. They also have some good ideas and some advice. It was really hard to do. You actually have to kind of like break relationship and then reposition your relationship. So I wonder if this is also not true here, where, if you set up that relationship where someone is the giver of instructions, the other one is the taker and the executor, you probably have to kind of reposition that relationship and to make sure that co-creation thing happens, because I don't think you just walk in and say, okay, now we shall co-create. I don't know if it makes sense. Like, this is probably where the setup comes in very, like, I mean, we haven't even spoken about setup, but that's probably where you guys kind of focus, right, to get this going.
Yeah, Van, it's a great observation, and I love the word trust. And something that I didn't share with you before in all of our hours of preparation was the word trust economies, or the term trust economies. And I think that that's also a shift in thinking around where you are repositioning how we perceive trust as human beings. And you can go and read up about trust economies for those watching. But I think that that's really quite a powerful thing to start thinking about. How do we take that trust and put it at the center of the way that we do things? Because if you trust someone, that person's going to go the extra mile, but they're also going to give you the time of day when you start diving deep onto some specific topics and things like that.
Perfect. And then going a bit deeper in the how, because we've touched on it, and is that you mentioned at some stage that there's strong kind of DNA of design thinking here. I mean, design thinking is also sometimes a little bit of an overused word because everybody thinks it's a workshop. But can you talk a little bit about the kind of where the DNA or of design thinking comes into play by setting up this relationship, or what role does it play here?
Yeah, great tee up, Vanna. And so from a design thinking, and why I've chosen that term to explain it is because I think it frames the experience. And I think that's why the word design and then thinking is obviously something that we're passionate about. But when you think about designing something, is so often when I think that we go into the product space or we go into the consulting space, we don't actually realize that we're designing an experience. We're designing a moment, and we're wanting to change the way a person interacts with a certain thing. So if you go back to lessons from the work that I've done in the advertising spaces, advertising, you are designing that experience to capture that person's attention and then to drive something off that attention that you've captured. So if inside of the reverse mentor space, and what we're looking to create inside of that is there's deep underlying elements from a design thinking and a lessons perspective. So maybe just three. So the first is access to information. So now you say, well, how does access to information inform design? And the reason for that is because as younger generations, we've got a vast access to information. So that needs to be considered when you think about how you're going to design your reverse mentor relationship. The second is curiosity. And curiosity means that you're always curious as a young thinker or as a reverse mentor to see if there are different ways of doing things. And then the third builds off those first two, and we are referred to continuous learning. And inside continuous learning, you're acknowledging that you don't just stop learning when you leave school or when you leave varsity or when you get a diploma or you get your MBA, but you are constantly learning through life, and you're always looking for those opportunities to further increase your knowledge and increase the wisdom that you can bring into situations like that. And Vanna, you touched on it earlier in terms of, some of my background, and those are three sort of things that I've brought quite heavily into the way that we think about reverse mentorship, is because I'm a strong believer that, as a younger generation, we've got access to phenomenal amounts of information at our fingertips, which as little as 5, maybe even 3 years ago in certain countries around the world, we didn't have access to that.
Yeah.
And, if I look at our relationship, I've never met you in person, but I already know so much about you. I've already learned so much about you. And I've also had the opportunity to connect with people that I'll never meet in person. And one of those is, Shane Parrish, who I know that you've got a quote lined up about that. But,
Yes, I do.
that's an awesome, segue or, transition into what we're talking about. The how from a design thinking perspective is around that very quote that's on the screen now, where Shane says, your first impression isn't in person, it's your digital footprint. And I think that that's been highlighted to many people over the last 12 months, but especially from a longer term perspective is how are you actually creating out your digital library? And if you think of it like an encyclopedia, how are you using all of those things that you're putting together, which are essentially building your knowledge base, and helping you then as a reverse mentor to bring those ideas to the table, bring that way of thinking, which can offer a different perspective.
And it's so interesting because I think sometimes what we do, I like to use this word sometimes, but is that we underestimate the power of these digital things. I think at times when I see like your quote, I think about the Dory Clarks of the world, the content creators, the heavy lifters, the people like you scroll a little bit and you just see Sinek floating past or Godin. But if you watch my co-host Tammy Gulaloob actually review someone's LinkedIn profile, it's actually become very strange for me where you kind of scroll down and you start seeing the activities that someone actually goes through. And just through those small observation of activities, you start to really get to know someone, what they like. I mean, it sounds very obvious, but I don't think we always do it with each other. We do it with the people we really love and follow. But if you're attentive, you're actually starting to build a lot of insight on someone just based on some of the activities that they go through digitally, right?
Yeah, and I love that, Van, and that's again those a great link to two resources that that have really informed my thinking. And the first is Center for Humane Technology, and many of you may know Tristan Harris because or Tristan, if I pronounce his name correctly, and the thinking that he's done, and particularly around the social dilemma, which was a massive hit. That got many people to realize and wake up to how these platforms work. And the second is a platform called New Public. which it's not on the screen there, but I know
Oh,
that banner
I
will
think
pop
I've
it
got
in
it here.
on
I
later.
can show you. There it is, isn't
They
it?
have it. There
Yeah.
we go. Yeah, there we go. And so this is a great great experiment that they're doing out there, and essentially why I put these two links in. So firstly, on humanetech.com is go and check out the work that Tristan's doing. He's got a awesome podcast called Your Undivided Attention, where he interviews thinkers and different ways of thinking from right around the world and different generations as well. But essentially, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make technology more humane. They're trying to put humans at the center of technology rather than just treat humans as a product
Oh,
of
yeah.
technology. And that becomes extremely powerful when you think about things from a design perspective as well. And the second element that we touched on is new public. And so just quickly on why these two things speak to one another and speak to reverse mentorship in particular is because New Public is talking about how do we design digital spaces. And they ask a simple question of, have we thought the way that we interact as humans inside of these digital spaces? Because there are lots of lessons that we can learn from the built environment. So if you take the concept and the construct of an architectural experience inside of a park, for example, and the thinking that goes into, okay, we want this bench here, or we want that color light post over there, and we want this dustbin over here. You're going through an experience and you're thinking through where people would like to walk to. And I think that that's something that we need to be far more conscious of, what you're mentioning, Van, about how people interact online. What do they do? What is their little activity? What does that say about their personality? And I think that those are two high-level examples around how I use sort of design thinking and just taking a step back sometimes to think through the way that people interact in this digital first world that we now live in.
Yeah, and and this is really just from some of the work that I've done this week, and just listening to you talk, because I'm going, like, I'm kind of like juxtaposing, like, you're the young guy, I'm the old guy. Not that I'm that old, by the way, but I think, like, the other thing that comes into play that is kind of been like bubbling to the top for me the last couple of days is taking time to reflect. And I think perhaps that's something that the mentee, in this case, someone who is kind of benefiting from young insight, when that person comes in hot, like, before you react so fast, because some of the design work we do, some of the kind of instant gratification is so fast. And I saw this week that a lot of the insights and understanding that I've gained is just by taking a moment, but like sitting back and like really thinking about things. And I feel like that's not always happening. I know you're a thinker, dude, because every time we talk, you've spent some time reading something new or whatever, but there is something in that kind of, I buy into everything you said about the curiosity, access to information, but then I think there's also time to kind of crunch that a little bit and say, okay, cool, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I love that, and it's quite interesting just how things overlap sometimes. And Jens and I were having a conversation about this yesterday, while we were recording a new podcast episode, and he was saying, sometimes he just comes up with ideas, and he can see that I'm sort of thinking quite deeply about it. And the example that I used was exactly what you've just mentioned around, I need to take moments to process things because I might not have had the
Yeah.
experiences that an experienced or older thinker might have, where I've got access to it somewhere deep down in my brain, in terms of, but then I have to surface it. I have to connect the dots inside of that space. Meanwhile, an experienced thinker has gone through those experiences in real life, so then they can quickly reference them. Meanwhile, I have to rather go and pull that string, or pull it up and see how it connects to what I've just heard and process that, rather than having experienced it in real life, if that makes sense.
It makes, I just looked at my little drawer here because you were triggering a thought, because I actually wrote this out and I can't remember it's not a framework, but it's kind of an approach, and it plays into why we sometimes jump to conclusions, because I think the whole thing builds up around, like, how do you actually get to a conclusion? The first, you start with data, then you interpret the data, then you get to an insight, and then you make a conclusion. And all that kind of represents, I think, experience. So for an older guy, we tend to jump to conclusions because we have the experience, but sometimes you're jumping to that conclusion not considering that the actual initial data changed, so you're jumping to the wrong conclusion, right? So there is some, you just triggered that thought. There's some truth in that, like slowing things down a little bit and just thinking about, why do I want to jump into this thing so fast?
Yeah,
Anyway,
and that's why, going back to what you just mentioned, Banner, the way that you framed the conversation was around the transition. And I think that we are in quite an interesting phase. And I was actually thinking about it last night and preparing for this is, thinking back to different transitions that have happened right the way over the last 20 years. So if you look at the internet boom in 1990 and the crash in the early 2000s, the financial crash in 2007, 2008. And then you now have got COVID, and then you've got the formation of NFTs, which we haven't even spoken about today. But
yeah.
for those inside of that space, we're talking about new ways of owning things. And I think that we are inside this shifting transition space, what I've referred to in other discussions around this liminal space, where it's exactly that. We need to take a step back. We need to process things that are happening in the moment to make sure that we take the best step forward.
And I think it's opportunity space, right? I mean, the thing is, I know we're talking about this reverse mentorship, but I think they all come into play because in the past, you were kind of a bit nervous to walk away from what you know. And like, look, all of us, you watching this, going through what we've just gone through and still going through, uncertainty is part of the game, but uncertainty is also opportunity, because I think there's a lot more slack in the sense of like being able to make mistakes now. Like, just look at like what we're doing at the moment. Like, if my camera cuts out or someone walks past in his underpants, no one's going to care, because it's just kind of like new kind of thing that we're figuring out, right? Not that that's going to happen, but I think this is really the space to experiment and embrace the kind of things that you're saying, Josh. Well, especially now, because it might become
Yeah,
harder.
especially now. And, that's what I went back to, right at the beginning. I said, we're really wanting, with this reverse mentor space, we're wanting to learn from others. We're wanting to connect with people, but we're also wanting to start a bigger conversation. And inside of starting that bigger conversation, we're hoping that there'll be certain things that will be unlocked, that will be unlocked globally, not from a selfish perspective, but from an actual enablement perspective, where we're saying that inside of the space, what we're doing in leading with reverse mentorship is that we're offering you as an individual, whether you're an experienced or a young thinker, we're offering you a space where you can come together, but we're also offering you the tools to do it yourself. Jens and I are quite passionate about it, is that we say that we would be doing an extremely bad job if we weren't making ourselves redundant. And so that's something that we're both passionate about in terms of, shifting and giving you the tools as a thinker, as a person, to take it forward and to drive it yourself as well.
And I mean, I had a mentor in the past that said to me, he's giving away all his knowledge because it actually puts pressure on himself to learn something new. So I guess we're all kind of trying to do that, right? There's two things we haven't really touched on, and I'm not sure I want to segue. The one is leadership. Where does that come in, and how does that align with the whole story?
So let me do for those watching and for those who may have heard of it. There's a drink in South Africa, and it's called a springbokkie, and it's got two parts to it. So I'm going to try and do, because I know that Van is a bit tight on time, and we've spoken a lot today, and I don't want to leave you with too many things, but I'm going to bring all three of these remaining elements into one, and we're going to start off with leadership. So we're going to take the top half of the springbokkie first. So we're picking up the glass now. And so leadership is essentially a different way of thinking. What we're saying is that there are phenomenal leaders around the world. We've all got opportunities to learn from one another, but we're just bringing a different shift to it. We're asking you to shift the way that you think so that you can become a better leader, whether you're a young thinker or an experienced thinker. We're giving you that opportunity, and that's really why we're passionate about leadership, is because we're working through this transition with you, or this transition phase that we're in at the moment. And that sort of frames now the next part is where there's a call to action. And inside of this call to action is that what you'll see on the screen there is a quote that I've come up with, and it's built off a number of different quotes, but excuse the noise from my side. But essentially it says that there are no silly questions. The only silly question is one that is never asked. And I think that really talks to how we're wanting to shift the way people think, is because sometimes I think that we are too afraid to ask those silly questions because we think that we're going to get judged. We think that we're going to come across as naive or not experienced enough. But actually, if you ask those questions and you listen to the response that you get, sometimes you can learn an enormous amount inside of that space. And why that sort of question wraps up the call to action is because we're wanting you, whether you're an experienced thinker or a young thinker watching this, I'm wanting you to take the first step. I'm wanting you to think about reverse mentorship, to think about how you can use it inside of your space. So if you're an experienced thinker, have a conversation, have a coffee chat with a young thinker inside of your organization. Sure, that may be a bit difficult to have in a physical setting now, but pick up a Zoom call, set up 15 minutes. And if you're a young thinker, ask your manager or ask your executive, which you've been too afraid to ask, for 15 minutes of their time, because you don't know what that could lead to. And I think that's sort of where we'd like to tee it up, or from my side, where I'd like to tee it up. And if you are feeling still a bit hesitant in doing that, you can check out the Reverse Mentor Lab podcast that I co-host with Jens Heitland, who you've heard a lot about today. So please pop over there and you can maybe learn some of our thinking from that podcast. But then you can also check out the XYZ Playground, which we've mentioned and which I've spoken about. And if you'd like to get in contact with me, you can connect on LinkedIn, or you can pop me an email. It's a fairly simple email. It's joshua@thexyzplayground.com. And yeah, Vanna, that's a wrap. I hope that I managed to compartmentalize all of the elements inside of that Springboky with that synthesis or bringing it all together.
Joshua, thank you so much, sir. And if you want to see Joshua and this other dodgy South African, because he's not the dodgy South African, the one on the other side is, in action, you can also catch us on the Innovation Breakfast with our fellow conspirator Jens Heitland. We try and collaborate and build out these kind of conversations even further. Joshua, it was a huge honor to have you on. I'm hoping that perhaps we'll see each other soon in Amsterdam if all goes to plan and we can all fly and get vaccinated. If that doesn't happen, I hope to see you in my country. Just take note, my country, very soon. Dude, jokes aside, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, man. And go well, sir, until we meet again.
Yeah, go well. And Vanna, thanks very much for the opportunity. You've been awesome to chat, get to know you. And yeah, look forward to connecting in person in the near future once we've sorted this vaccination out. But thank you again.
Excellent. Let's jump over to Tammy. She's ready to go. See you later, Josh. Chat again. Ciao. Welcome back, Tammy. It's time to look at another profile. But before we start with that, like, what have you been up to since we last went live? Because we took a 2-week break, right?
Yeah. Well, Werner, I've had my head down in my new book. Got all my comments back from my editor, so I'm doing a few rewrites, sharpening up the edges and getting it ready and polished up so that it can get formatted and picking out graphics for the cover. So it's going to look really nice. So people will look at it and say, "Ooh, that's a nice looking book. I think I want to buy that."
Exactly.
So yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on the book and preparing a new keynote speech too, so that I can reach more people and send some really positive messages out there to people about how to really take greater ownership of your career based on something we talked about a few weeks ago, the CEO framework. So I'm crafting that. So I'm kind of doing dual writing projects right now.
It's exciting. And tell me, like, maybe as we go, like, as you go through this adventure, and hopefully you don't get so well, like #1 bestseller, that you can still stay on the live streams, right? But it'll also be interesting to see how you go through this process, because there's a whole bunch of stuff, like you said, like marketing of the book, the cover, then the keynote that you're doing, and that's kind of in your plan, right? To support, like the book supporting what you're doing, but then what you're doing also supporting people actually getting the book in their hands. So that's going to be quite an adventure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just want people to feel good about what they're doing in their work and having a vision for where they want to go with it and have it be satisfying and meaningful. We spend so many hours out of our lives in our careers, in our work, and why would we not want to find it to be more satisfying and fulfilling? That's the whole name of the game in my book. It's not about saving the world necessarily, although if that's what you want to do, great. But it's really about feeling good about your life day to day and making whatever contributions you want to make, and feeling like, you feel like getting out of bed in the morning,
Exactly. Exactly. It's so important, man. And talking about
Yeah.
doing important stuff, we have, first of all, important thing is that you can catch Tammy at her podcast, Work from the Inside Out, also the title of her upcoming book. I love saying that. And you can go over to tammygulaloop.com. There's all kinds of free stuff there as well if you're interested in all career kind of things. Good
Yeah.
things come to those who go to tammygulaloop.com. And I just came up with that. So Tammy, like while we're having fun here, today's victim is actually for 100% clarity is also a good friend of mine, a former colleague, Alta Nell from South Africa. She's a product design, user experience designer, and designer. She's actually quite good. She saved my bum a few times, but she asked if you would mind having a look at her profile. She's kind of a bit of a freelancer, but then also always looking at where the next opportunity is going to come from. So it's she's
Great.
intending her profile to be a bit more of a kind of draw people in, potential employers or gigs. So
Great. Wonderful. That's a great perspective that you just shared. And the fact that you even know that about her, even though she's a good friend, sometimes, we don't always know what our friends' vision is. Sometimes people don't have those conversations. So that in and of itself is a plus, that you have that knowledge of her, that she, what she's doing today, but that she wants to have a vision of where she's headed and what that might look like, or what she might be open to. And I can tell you right now that just looking at the visual of what I see right here, of her profile, she's got, an interesting image in her banner and a nice photo, and it says right underneath her name in the headline exactly what she does, and we know exactly where she's located. She's got the 500 plus connections. So she's off to a great start with her profile.
exactly.
Definitely.
Good on you, Tam.
And what's really
Alta.
nice is right underneath it, it says highlights, reach out to Alta for pro bono consulting and volunteering. So you know that she's ready and willing to give, which is great. That gives you a nice impression. Let's see what she's about.
Let's go down there and see what's, and I'll quickly expand that so you can see what's happening.
So this is giving us an idea of both what she does and what she cares about, and what kind of work she's doing now, what she's currently doing and creating. I would say that this is all good. It's concise, 3 clear paragraphs. It's easy to read, and gives you a really good comprehensive view of how she works with people, what they can expect. So, I think that if I was to, offer her any kind of feedback to change anything, I mean, it's really comprehensive in a short, a short clip, which is great. She might want to add in, if she had anything like, whether she had a metaphor, or give people even a little bit more of an idea of who she is, what she's like to work with.
Yeah.
A little bit more of who she is, not just what she does, or it says she's passionate about solving complex design challenges, and that she's collaborated. That's still more about what she does. So I would say, tell us a little bit more about who you are, not just what you do. And even though it's folded in there a little bit about who she is within it, she could even throw a little bit more in about, who she is. Why would someone want to engage with her just as a person?
And tell me, like, I mean, I know we kind of started off this segment with me joking about her. But I think what you said, and also listening to some of the comments you've made about some of the previous reviews we've done, it's like I joked about the fact that she always saved my butt, but that is
Yeah.
actually very true. And so maybe if one of the reflections here, and maybe with a little bit more detail and better language, is that she tends to save people in very dire situations, especially in this space. Like when things need to turn around fast, you need someone who's super creative. You need someone who's going to bring some thinking to the table. So, I mean, that's kind of how I see her. But like you said before, it's like people see me as a...
Yes, she could say, I mean, she says I'm passionate about solving complex design challenges and have collaborated, right? That's kind of that's very nice. Maybe there could be some stronger language in there, or people who have worked with me have called me their,
that's the
maybe
one.
they
Yeah.
wouldn't say call me their butt saver, but could could say something along the lines of people have been able to count on me when they feel like they've run out of ideas, or they need another pair of objective eyes on a
Oh,
complex
that's a good one.
situation.
Yeah.
Or I've been able to help somebody see their way through something when they're too close to it themselves, and provide them with some sight on something. So I think sort of showing that there's another layer or level of value that she can add to someone else who's highly competent but is just too close to it to see it
Perfect.
themselves. But that she does it in a way that's objective and not making somebody else wrong or making somebody else feel bad about what they're maybe struggling with. So that she really she adds to the situation, doesn't take away from it.
Excellent. Got that one.
Yeah.
So if you go down to her featured stuff, and you can see here, like,
that's
some...
that's beyond my comprehension, but it looks
like,
interesting.
yeah. So she I mean, because before we went on, I quickly got everything prepared, and this is one of the first images I saw, and this is so Alta because it's like design work. You can see the interface stuff. Of course, there's complexity here, but like she's really got like kind of a little bit of a showcase of her work. Yeah.
Of her work, which is great, because some people don't use all the features of LinkedIn to do that. So this is very smart on her part that she's done that she puts things up that really give people a visual look and feel of what she's capable of. And I like the fact that she's showing it in a couple of different formats, because sometimes I've noticed that when people have these capabilities, they don't always show what it might look like in a mobile format versus on a computer screen. So this is really, really good. And you can see all the different ways in which she can display some of the things that she's done, and also that she's working in a number of different industries.
Perfect.
That's great. Yeah, great. I'm very happy with what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, she's not too bad, Alta. Not too bad.
No, it's even when you're doing a lot of things right, sometimes you need to be reminded to do more things right. And so, because I think sometimes the worst thing that people do is they're just so busy criticizing themselves, they need to be reminded to just keep doing things right. Or, even little tweaks like we just talked about with her summary, just a little tweak here and there, and you want to change things up a little bit here and there once in a while, because it does help raise your profile
Keep it
within
fresh.
the algorithm too. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. And it's nice to see that she is giving she's giving props to some of her colleagues there, which is very nice. But it's important that she does make comments, not just liking things. So I think that's really good.
Yeah.
And you can see her personality coming through too in her comments. So that's really nice too, where she's saying, oh, I'm going to miss you, or that's really well done, I'm proud of you. So it's another way, even just looking at her profile page, where you get to see a bit of her personality there too, which is great.
Excellent.
And her technical expertise, because she's also mentioning some technical aspects here in her comments as well. So I think that when people get, if people realize that when your activity shows up on your profile, you have an opportunity for people to see the nature of your activity and the kinds of things that you comment on. It gives people a sense of a little bit more about who you are, not just what you do.
It's such a good one. That's one of the ones that I like started, like you actually switched me onto it. And like when I go to other people's profiles now, because sometimes someone, like you meet someone new, like I'm not actually drawn to the activity to see, what kind of stuff this person's into, what are they saying, what are they promoting. You can see both positive and negative stuff in that activity. It's like such a kind of little window into someone's world.
Exactly. And, it gives you a sense of just, is this somebody I want to get to know better, or someone I might want to work with, or someone I might want to refer other people to, or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So given that LinkedIn is all about those relationships, so it's really very, very helpful. So let's take a look at her experience. So she's got some years of experience in a few different places. My comment here, which I often see with a number of people, is that they list their job titles and their places of employment, but they don't include a lot of detail about what they've done. I
Yeah.
would say that this is something that she ought to include a few sentences, or I would say better yet, some, bulleted statements about her experience in each of these places, especially if they are things that she wants to be known for or might want to be hired for, because I'm not sure if I can, sine qua non, which I'm
Yeah.
believing is her company now. If she wants to be hired by people, they need to know what she does,
Yeah.
what does sine qua non do, or if that's actually, maybe that isn't her company because she's
I
calling herself
think
a product design lead. So
Yeah, I
maybe
think
she's an
that's
employee.
employer. Yeah, she's employee there as
Okay.
far as I know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, but it sounds like from her summary statement that she's open to some freelance work as well. So,
Yeah.
she wants people to know her in a certain way. She needs to really, in an easy to read way, have people see what is it she'd like to be known for. So it's not about listing every little thing you've ever done, but list the things that you want people to know you for.
And I,
So
I
there's room for additional information
and I
here.
think sometimes because we navigate, and this might be a bit of a half-off statement, but because we navigate this world of technology, not everybody knows what a product design consultant is. I mean, I understand it as a completely different thing, potentially what Alta does, or what does a product design lead do? You know,
Absolutely. And, it might be a little bit different in different companies or different industries. Um, so I've seen where, I've had clients, for example, who have certain titles that are the same title in two different companies, and they might even both be high-tech companies. And yet when we start getting into it and talking about what they do and what they're responsible for, there are some significant differences.
differences. Yeah.
Even though they might both be doing product marketing, the way they interface with, let's say, cross-functionally in the organization, or the things they're responsible for, or the levels of knowledge they need to even have about the product, it can really vary from company to company. So you really want to articulate what are the things that you want to be known for. So it's not just about, here's what I did. It really is about, what do you want to be known for? Because what you did is important, but you really want to be hired based on what you want what you want to be doing, not just
Yeah, where you going, not
saying,
not
well,
where
here, yeah,
you've been. Yeah.
no, we're right, exactly. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you know what?
So,
I think there is
what?
actually detail here, because the thing is, I'm on the iPad, so I'm showing you the iPad. So she's got some detail. If you go into it, there's some detail here.
Oh,
Yeah.
there is detail there. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, this is iPad. This is
Well,
all my
then,
fault.
Alta, forgive me. Well,
Yeah.
now let's see now. What we have here is, those are descriptions of the company. Okay. And then she talks about what she's responsible for.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I mean, it's
great.
solid advice though, Tammy. I mean, I've seen people who don't do this. So
Yeah,
there
I
is
see a
some,
lot of it. So
yeah.
so then there's another piece here. So on the iPad, it doesn't show up as readily as it
Yeah.
does on
Yeah.
other platforms or
Interesting.
other pieces of equipment. I would also say though that sometimes when you put things in there as a paragraph, people are less likely to read it than if you put it in bullet form.
Yeah.
So there there's something to be said for laying it out. I'm saying this to a design person, which kind of intimidates me a little bit, but I would consider trying something that might be a little bit easier for someone to skim, because when you start writing things out in long sentences and you have a lot of, I did this, I did that, I did this, it can you can lose people along the way. I'm not saying that that's totally true, but it's clear that she's done a lot of really interesting things here, and I would want to know that people really got it, that they really were able to sort of eyeball it and say, look at that. There's a couple of words that just jump off.
Tammy, a question I have for you, because I don't have a clear, I've actually looked at my profile because I'm trying to fix mine in the background while you're helping everybody else. But the one thing that I also see that
really?
I'm
we could
stealing.
just do your profile one day, Werner.
Let's wait. Just wait 1 or 2 more reviews. so
you're working on your profile while I'm working on Alta's. That's nice.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I can't let Alta look at my profile and laugh, or no, you have to clean your own house. But anyway, the one thing I want to ask you though is I saw that I was also tending to do this. So for example, the first part of the paragraph is this describing the company. And I think, for example, IXO World, I've never heard of them. So saying that IXO World focus on blockchain. But then some of my companies, I try and say, oh, company X is a great leader and they do this, and I kind of up the company. And then I started thinking potentially explain what the company does, because not everybody knows maybe, what TBWA worldwide is, but then go into what you're doing, not necessarily setting, I feel like if someone's interested in you, they're not necessarily going to go is this a great company? They want to know what you've done there, and then maybe on their own try and understand what the company is. Or what do you think?
So if I understand your question,
how much do you have to say about the company in your own description? Yeah, I think that's the short question.
Okay. So I think it's helpful to say at least, one short statement about what kind of company it is, if it's not obvious what they do. I also, though, think that once you've started that, you really want to kind of be consistent throughout.
Yeah.
Now, clearly, there are some companies that are just well known. If you've worked at Google or Microsoft or IBM, people know those companies. But and in that case, you might name the division of the company you've worked in and maybe explain your role within that division, and that's enough. But when you start talking about, for example, OpenDNA, someone could say OpenDNA, maybe that's a biotech company.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's an artificial intelligence, and machine learning systems company. So, yes, we know what Deloitte is, but she worked at Deloitte Digital.
Yeah, what is that? Yeah, how does that fit in there? Yeah.
Oh, I know. Well, I don't know. I heard some funny things about Deloitte Digital, especially the one in South Africa.
They hire any riffraff,
But I think you give people information they need, but you don't have to. You don't want to overdo it, only because there's this way in which people feel like they've got to explain everything. And I think you just give people enough information so that they can ask you more questions.
Perfect. That's a good point.
If they're wondering, you want people to ask you questions. You don't have to tell them everything. So There you go.
Good one. Okay. And then
Yeah.
there's
Let's see
the
what we
extent
got
of
here.
Alta's. I just want to see if I go back here because the iPad, and then it's education and all these things. And I'm going to go and see all again so we can see the detail. Oops, we're going back to, I need to get used to this iPad. And then we have education, and then also her volunteering at the bottom there.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's a nice touch. I like that when people add additional activities and things that they've been involved with, even if it's not directly related to their profession. I always think that adds, because they can't. A lot of times they can't fit that into their resume. So and it's not always appropriate. So it's really a nice thing they can do on LinkedIn.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
What else is here? Then there's skills and endorsements.
It's always a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
Yep. She could be nice to have a few more there. Because clearly she's very qualified. But she's, her other credentials really show up so beautifully, the skills and endorsements. I think if she was really hoping to be found by a lot of recruiters, you want to up your endorsements because that's one way to get found. But my guess is she would get found anyway. And then she's got how many? Can you click on see all? Does she have other recommendations as well?
Oh yeah, the screen is a bit weird here, but she's got quite a few, and the latest one is 2019 that you can see here. I just can't show you unfortunately, with the way this is laid out. I'll fix this for next time.
Oh, good. No, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Very good.
She's given
some
a
of
few
them go
as well.
back a ways, but she's got some more current ones too.
Yeah. 2019 is the most current, so maybe like one or two of the latest companies would maybe make sense, right?
Oh, I thought there was a 2021 in there.
She's given one in 2020.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, when she has a chance, she should maybe get a more current one. But again, if she's not pounding the pavement for a new job, it's not urgent. I think the most important thing you can do on LinkedIn, this is really the most important thing, is, well, she is thinking about a new job at some point.
Yeah.
So, although not immediately, but I think that the most important thing you can do on LinkedIn is just be engaged. Make sure that your profile is up to date. Hers is in pretty good shape, if not very good shape. And she should just be regularly engaged, because that's how you get noticed. That's how you stay at the top of the list. And that's how you, develop new relationships and keep building your network and connect with people who share your interests or who might be in a position to hire you or a position to engage with you professionally in some way. So
Perfect.
whether that's through groups, whether that's through other posts that you see, or whether you post something that you never know when you post something that it could start to trend. I've had occasionally some of my podcast episodes start trending, and I can't explain why certain ones do, but it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. And she's definitely in the space where, she could do a little bit more content. I know Alta, so engagement's definitely there. She's got some honors and awards.
Very good. Very, very good. All good stuff.
And then she's got Alta Now Designer as a URL link for her profile.
Perfect.
Ooh.
And
I don't want to put a phone number on the interwebs.
Nope.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. maybe if she's got her phone number on her, a lot of times people recommend that you have your contact information readily available so that people will get in touch with you if you are wanting to be found.
Exactly.
It's a funny thing. Some people are very protective of their information, won't even put their email addresses on LinkedIn. And I understand that for some people that doesn't work, but for other people, it's really, it doesn't make sense to me, because you're on LinkedIn because you want to connect with people and have those interactions and maybe even be found by a recruiter or by a
Makes sense.
hiring
Yeah.
manager or, something. So I'm always surprised how hard some people are to reach after you find them on LinkedIn.
I want to
I don't
network, but
understand it.
don't phone me. No, I
Yeah,
was
I
actually
want
also
to network, but you can't reach me.
I don't want to talk to you. Anyway,
Right.
so she's got some good interests going there, it looks like.
She's in good shape. She's
Yeah.
in very good shape.
I
There's
don't
a few
see
things she can do.
creative coffee break on these interests. She needs to sort that out.
Well, okay. So like we said, there's a
Yeah.
few things she
There's a
needs
few
to add.
tweaks.
A few tweaks, I know I'm definitely having a creative coffee break.
Cheers.
Alta, you're in good shape here. Keep doing what you're doing. You're commenting, you're adding value, you're giving props to other people, you're engaged, you're showing up with your lovely personality, it seems, and with your knowledge and your skills. And it looks like you enjoy what you do, which is important, to exude that kind of enjoyment and pleasure with what you do. And it's all good. There's a few
Oh,
things you
good.
can tweak, and I think just stay engaged and make it clear to people what it is that, not only how can they help you, how can you help them. That's the name of the game.
Perfect. Tammy, it's always a pleasure to connect with you. I always look forward to our little conversations around the LinkedIn
Me
profiles.
too.
And
Thank
thanks again
you.
for your time to do this. And we'll be connecting again with the next live stream because we have a shared friend who's going to be here. So hopefully you can stick around to also give her some Tammy sass so we can really welcome her on the show. So it's going to be Fei Wu in the next live stream. And then Tammy, thank you once again for doing this. And then as another point, if you want your profile reviewed, you can either direct message me or message Tammy. We're always keen to have more people. And also we're going to, hopefully, Tammy, if I can twist your arm, we'll have another conversation around strategy for careers again as maybe part of one of these sessions that we do, because I know you have a few other thoughts also in your mind.
As I say, Werner, I always have something to say, and everyone's entitled to my opinion.
With that, Tammy, thank you very much. Catch you in the next one. Yes, everybody is entitled to Tammy's opinion. I love that. So once again, on today's show, I had Joshua Nuttall from South Africa talking about reverse mentorship. Super interesting topic. If you're interested, go and Google that. A lot of interesting thoughts around that. And I also encourage you to check out, we've been name dropping a lot during the conversation with Jens Heitland, Joshua. They're doing a lot of work in that space and creating a lot of content, and a lot of it's accessible. So I encourage you to go check that out. And then, of course, Tammy's going to be back again with me next week. We'll probably do another profile review. So if you want to be part of that, it's fun. And it's important, I think, having a good profile and also getting a little bit of a step in the direction of building your career and building connection. I know it's helped me personally a lot, especially during these times, to connect with people and get business, more importantly. And then as I wrap this up, because it's gone long, and I also accept that people will kind of dip in and out of these shows because it's not really a break. It's kind of a marathon, right? But if I may ask you, jump into my mailing list at creativecoffeebreak.live. I don't spam. I just let you know when I go live and when I publish new videos, new content. So I'm going to shut this down and go grab another cup of coffee. And I want to say thank you to you. Thank you for watching. If you've gotten this far, and I forgot to ask in the beginning of the show, if you see this, please drop a comment in the comments to tell me where you're from and where you're watching from, because I'd love to know. I'd love to get to know you a little bit. So yeah, mailing list. Love you very much for watching this, and catch you in the next show with Fai Wu. I'm super excited about that. So catch you in the comments.